Part 3, documentation. No one likes this part. No one likes doing this. It's horrible. In fact, the documentation can take longer than the development. I mean, developing on Monday.com is really quick. Documenting, my gosh, it's so time consuming, depending again on the complexity. Simple systems, not really, it's super easy, but when there's a lot of moving parts and there's a lot of automations and there's a lot of integrations and you're connecting with third-party apps, it gets very complicated. But why must you document? Well, first off, especially with me as a Monday.com consulting company, we do work with a lot of clients and we are building a lot of Monday.com systems. And typically what happens is that sometimes someone asks us a question about the system maybe a year or 6 months after we've actually built the solution. And because we're building so many different solutions, we forget it. We don't know exactly where the parts is, because what could happen is that there could be a break somewhere. And it could either be a Monday.com bug, or it could be that someone isn't following the process in the Monday.com board correctly. And if we don't have that documentation, we have to go back and look at the board and go, okay, where is this issue? And we have to kind of remember what is the trigger. We need to remember, okay, but remember, you could have a trigger that activates something, that is another trigger that activates something in a different application that activates another thing. I mean, it's ridiculous. And if you don't document that, it's going to take you a very long time in order to actually find what the bug or the problem is and then communicate the solution through to the client. And if you're doing this internally, the thing that you also have to remember is that documenting also allows you to easily hand over systems, right? If you're the owner of the business, just understand that you are basically the main go-to person when something is wrong with Monday.com. And eventually, I promise you are going to want to hand that over. But the issue is that if all these systems that you've built are in your head, and again, this is not just with Monday.com. I once had this client, and it was the most amazing Google Sheet system I'd ever seen. This guy was so clued up, and it just worked so nicely in his business. The only problem with it was it just wasn't scalable. And when I took a look at this, and it was so much work to actually move over to a Monday.com system, and also I don't know, he didn't really have any documentation with regards to how we would be able to do that. So it would have taken him months to actually communicate what everything does. So especially when you're working with a consultant or a freelancer, you would pay them to be able to communicate what you want the system to do, and then you'd pay them again to actually build the system. Okay, because if you don't document the stuff, it's going to be harder for you to be able to communicate exactly what the system needs to do. That includes support. Even if you're not moving from an app to another app, and you're just saying, listen, I want you to hand over this. I want you to take over the system. If you can't hand over that support, it's always going to be stuck with you. And you really want those documents to be able to help the individuals that you want to be able to support understand the system quicker and to be able to support your users better. Okay. The other thing is that it helps you to communicate changes. That's also documentation. You're not going to have the perfect system on the get-go, and you're going to have a change log, and you need to be able to communicate those changes to people in the over the course of time. Because obviously you might change something like a trigger was activating this, but now it's activating this. And obviously if you aren't documenting those changes and you want to then start onboarding new people to the system and you have the old stuff, well, they're not going to really be aware. They're not going to really understand that. So you have to constantly keep documenting the changes, especially for your new staff going forward. Okay, and documentation resolves a huge issue that I find with most low-code, no-code systems. It helps you avoid key man issues. I kid you not, this is a this is a terrible risk for your company. Absolutely terrible. you have to really consider about this. This is a huge issue in organizations, especially with these low-code, no-code systems that run your entire business workflows. If the key man that is responsible for the development vanishes, and you've got all these workflows working on the system and something goes down, business stops. That's the problem with having everything in one place. It stops. And if you haven't got the support to actually resolve that, and I'm not talking about technical support, like Monday.com technical support is amazing, but I'm talking about the actual workflows, the way that your developer within your organization has actually built your system. Monday.com doesn't know that workflows, and if there's no documentation, no one can go and look. You would have to phone him. Hopefully he's on holiday and he's happy to take a call, but if the guy's in a coma or she's in a coma, what are you going to do? It's a huge, huge risk for companies, and that is why documentation is so important. And it mustn't just be stupid documentation. You need to make certain that you can hand over that documentation so that someone will be able to resolve issues. Okay. Now, documentation is very tricky, and one of the things that I have done is I've actually got a boot camp where we call Develop an Internal Monday.com Champion for Your Business, and we go through how to actually document all the stuff. So this is a 2-day virtual boot camp. I basically run 1 or 2 a month, depending on the month. Really, I only have, I basically take 10 people from different organizations, and we basically just go through the boot camp, and we teach them, we go more in depth about planning, development, documentation, onboarding and training, the support and continuous improvement, as well as reporting. We go way more in depth than what I'm doing in this video. I'm just touching on this stuff. But that is a program, and really, I honestly think that you need one or two users at least to come into the program itself, and that's where I can actually help and teach your team how to document their Monday.com systems so that it allows for easy handover and allows them to support. Okay, but what I'm going to do is I will see you in the next video, which is where we're going to be talking about the training and onboarding, which is the most difficult part of this actually. And I'll see you there. Okay.